Hey, what's up, Altaloma? What's going on? You missed me yet? I miss all you guys. Well, I'm out here up in the Claremont Hills Wilderness Park practicing my social distancing. Decided to get a little mountain bike in. I usually do this stuff after school and on the weekends, but figured since I'm on my Corona-cation, may as well get out here before it starts raining. I'll let you take a look around where I'm at. This is where I am. That's out east. Altaloma's out there. There's my bike. I think I'm doing good. Staying 6 feet away from people. What do you think? That's west. LA's out there. And of course, our mountains that we always look at are up here. Anyway, I think this is good stuff to do while you're on vacation. Get outside. Don't get stuck inside. Don't just sit there on your phone. Don't lay on your bed. Get out. Go for walks. Go ride your bike. Take care of those things that you've always wanted to take care of. If your room's a mess, clean it. There you go. Hey, what an idea. Anyhow, I'm going to be posting some stuff soon. Watch for Remind. Watch for Google Classroom. And I'm going to hold you to all that information. So you make sure you get that stuff done. Manage your time wisely. Don't wait till the end. Bad idea. And if you're helping out at home, I'm going to ask you to be patient. Patient with your folks, patient with your siblings, patient with everybody around you. You start getting frustrated, get outside, get some exercise, and then try to be patient again. It helps out. But I hope you're doing well. I'm going to try to do a video a day. And we'll see what else I can come up with. All right, watch for my communications. Enjoy your time. Be cool out there. See ya. Okay, second attempt. Not very good at this yet. We're going to get our way through this for sure. So what are we doing today? We're going to solve quadratic equations by taking square roots. Now we've solved quadratic equations a couple other ways so far. We've solved them by graphing, finding the x-intercepts. And then we've also solved them by factoring, still finding the x-intercepts. Remember, they're called roots, they're called zeros, they're called x-intercepts. But now we're going to solve this by taking square roots. The first thing I need to remind you of, though, is that when you take the square root of a number, say 4, that you actually get two solutions, and we call it plus or minus 2. And this literally equals positive 2 and negative 2. And if you're asking yourself why that is, that's because positive 2 squared, that equals 4. And negative 2 squared also equals 4. So the square root of 4 has two answers. That's going to be key because you might recall when we solve a quadratic equation, we are expecting two answers. So there we go. Don't forget that, okay? Of course, now you might be asking yourself, how do we do this? Well, you know what I do, right? I say, how do I do it like this? How? Well, I've got a couple steps. Number one is to isolate the squared term. Once I have that term isolated, the second step is to take the square root of both sides. But sometimes when I'm done taking the square root of both sides, I still have to complete or finish solving. So I'm just going to say finish solving. And I think in a minute you'll see what I mean by that. I want to remind you that you can pause this video at any time if you need a little bit more time to write these notes. So go ahead and pause that if you'd like. I'm just going to do a couple of examples. I think you're going to get this pretty simply. Typically the directions will just say solve, but I want to remind you that sometimes you just need to come up with this idea by yourself, like for instance in word problems, but we'll get to that in a minute. Let's just try number one. This is going to be a pretty easy one. Like, what about x squared equals 9? Well, the steps I gave you said step 1, isolate the squared term. Well, it's already isolated. So all I need to do is do step 2, which is take the square root of both sides. And I'll remind you that this square root cancels out that square, and that just leaves me with x. So I have x equals, what's the square root of 9? What did I say? How many solutions do we get? How many answers we get to? It's literally plus or minus 3, which again means literally plus 3 and negative 3. So that's pretty easy. You're going to see a whole bunch like that, but they're not all that easy. Let me show you a couple other examples. Here we go. Here's an example that's a little bit more complicated. We're going to do all 3 steps. I need this squared term isolated. So the first thing I'll do is subtract the 7 on both sides like that. This will go away. I'll get the 2x squared equals 32. Divide both sides by 2. You know how to do this. We're just solving equations, that's all. And I get the x squared equals 16. And look, I have this isolated, which is exactly what I wanted. The last step here, well, second to last step then, is to take the square root of both sides. And once again, I will remind you, this cancels with that, leaving you x equals, what's the square root of 16? It's not just 4, don't say that. It's plus or minus 4. Literally 2 distinct answers, plus or minus 4. So far so good, but I've got a couple more for you. All right, how about example 3? Very similar in structure, but it's going to create a problem. This is one of those what ifs, like, you know, math never stays the same. It always changes, makes it a little bit more complicated. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to get this, try to isolate that squared term. This, of course, cancels out, leaving me 3x squared equals negative 15. And then I'll divide by 3 and divide by 3. This goes away. I get x squared equals negative 5, and I have isolated the squared term, and that's good. But now when I go to take the square root of this, in order to cancel that, and of course whatever you do to one side, you have to do it to the other, this is where I run into a problem. As you've been told for years, you cannot take the square root of a negative number. When you find this situation, then you have run into a situation where there is no real solution. Now, there are imaginary solutions, but we're not ready for that today. For now, there's no real solution. When you try to take the square root of a negative number, we pretty much stop and say no real solution. All right, now number 4 here presents a few problems. And that's because this right here is the square term, and it clearly looks different than what we've been dealing with before, but I still need to get it isolated. So I'm going to start by adding the 3 like this. So if I add the 3, of course this cancels out, leaving me just this 2 times x minus 1 squared, and that equals 18. But I need this squared thing all by itself. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide by 2 and get rid of that 2. Just a note, you cannot distribute because this is all tied up with that exponent. That would be doing PEMDAS incorrectly. You'd be doing multiplication before exponent. So we can't distribute. We're just going to divide both sides. And of course, this goes away. And what does that leave me? Well, that leaves me this. This is x minus 1 squared equals 9. And now, since these are in parentheses, I know I have 2 terms, and typically you can't take the square root of 2 terms at the same time, but since it's in parentheses, it's really basically 1 term. So I can take the square root of this entire thing, and of course, whatever you do to one side, you do to the other, but this is going to cancel that out. But this is where I end up with a slight situation. I have x minus 1 equals, what's the square root of 9? We've talked about it's plus or minus 3. Well, what do you do now? Of course, this is where step 3 comes into play, where I said finish solving. I'm going to pause this real quick and change it. Be right back. So here's where I was. I just needed to get some more room. But I need to get x by itself. So, of course, I'm going to add 1 here. But what do you do with this? What is plus or minus 3 plus 1? Well, I'm going to remind you that this actually means positive 3 and negative 3. So we actually have to deal with both of those situations. Like Positive 3 plus 1 is 4. Negative 3 plus 1 is negative 2. That's how I get my two solutions. But we don't write it that way. The way we write it is this. We say 1 plus or minus 3. And that literally means we're going to break this up like 1 plus 3 and x equals 1 minus 3. Notice what I did is I took this plus or minus symbol and I separated it like that. And what that leaves me with is the answer I just said, which was x equals 4 and negative 2. So while this does mean that, and we're adding 1 to both of them, we don't write it that way. We write it this way. Something you need to get used to. You're going to see this a lot. And then we separate that out like so. Do you have any questions? Anyone? Questions? Oh, kidding. This is a video. So how'd I do for my first video? I did the best I can. I hope it helps. You can look in the book, section 9.1, for a couple of examples. And the videos aren't bad either. But here, take a look at this. This is your homework. All right, well, there it is. Again, you can pause this video at any time and make sure you can write that down. There's a worksheet in the Google Classroom, and 9.1. Read example 4. It's a word problem. 16 through 19 are word problems. It's pretty simple if you read the example. Now, how do you turn this into me? What I'd like is I'd like you to turn it into the classroom with a picture. Take a picture of your work and your answers, highlight those answers for me so I can see them, and turn it into the classroom, okay? By when? Well, I'm going to say by tomorrow at 5, okay? Let's see. If you have problems, message me, and we'll see what we can work out. But, yeah, remember, no work, no points. Hope you guys are doing well. We'll talk soon.